Good afternoon. Happy lunchtime. Happy hump day, everybody. If you're out there and you can actually hear me, please, please just give me a little shout. I'm trying a new microphone today, and I'm not sure if it's actually working or not. So if you are there, please give me a shout, a like, or a wave, or anything, anybody. I'm not sure that anybody's actually watching yet, so hopefully it won't be too long before somebody's there and can give me a like, let me know that you can actually hear me. In fact, I think what I'll do is I'm going to listen in my headphones and see if I can hear. It sounds to me like it's not working, but I can't tell for sure. So hopefully somebody's out there and will, I don't know who's out there watching, but if you can hear me, can you please give me a like? Let me know that you can hear me. I'd really appreciate it, because I'm not sure that this microphone is actually working. Can you hear me okay out there? Because I wanted to talk a little bit today about disappointment and grief, and I'm hoping that you can hear me. Can you hear me? Please let me know if you can. If you can hear me, somebody give me a like, somebody give me a shout, let me know that you can hear me. I'd really appreciate it. Yeah, just kind of let me know that you're actually hearing me. I'm trying to hear, I'm trying to see. Is it working? I've got a new microphone, so I'm hoping that it's working. Give me a second here if it's not. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Can you give me a like or I don't know, a message if you can hear me okay? I'm hoping so. Yes, okay, Bob, thank you. You can hear me? Good, thank you. Phew! Appreciate that. I've got a new microphone and I'm just like, oh gosh, is this actually working? It's not actually a new microphone, it's one I've had for a long time. Now that would have been disappointing if I could have, if I couldn't actually communicate with you all, but thank you for joining me. I do appreciate it. So, I don't know if you actually read the intro today. It's quite a long one. I put in a quote there that actually one of my fellow widows, she actually quoted it earlier today, which was quite fortuitous because today's talk was going to be around disappointment and grief in this time of COVID. There's been a lot of, negativity and a lot of downers around this, and we've had to sacrifice quite a lot. So I just wanted to talk about that because sacrificing for the greater good has always been part of what has made us a good human society, has made civilization possible. Margaret Mead actually said that the dawn of civilization from her perspective was when she discovered the bones of a early human that had a broken femur that had mended, right? So what that actually indicated to her was that someone in a tribe or whatever actually looked after that person. They were there while that person's leg mended. It had been broken. It then healed, right? Because, if we have a broken leg, we're not going to be walking around on it very much. It's going to be excruciating. And considering the type of fracture that had existed in this early human, it was a pretty bad break, and therefore that person had to have been cared for or looked after by other members of their tribe. And that's really what the dawn of civilization is all about. And that's why, we have this societal obligation really to look after each other. And that's why, stay home, stay safe, stop the prevention of the virus stop the virus from spreading and enhance the prevention of, the slowing of or the flattening of the curve, right? So that's why we're staying home. That's why we're staying safe. So that's all what, that's what this is all about. And so there is a difference, though, between what we're experiencing as a result of that, which is a lot of disappointment because we're missing out on a lot of things. What we're some of us may still be, but what we're kind of not feeling is grief. So I'm actually alluding to a lot of things outside of my own sort of thought processes here. I'm actually pulling in from other people today on this subject because there are a lot of people out there who've said things better than I have. One is this Devine quote that I've put into the, to the blurb around the talk today, which I'd like to read at some point as well. But the other is that one of my other fellow widows, she actually is the one who raised this. So here's the thing. I'm really disappointed that there's no baseball. Okay? No baseball season this year so far. And there may not be a baseball season this year. And I'm willing to accept that. But I am really disappointed. I had season tickets to the San Diego Padres, 40 games. I was looking forward to going to see a bunch of games. I was hoping to get tickets to all 4 Cubs games against the Padres so that I could watch the Cubs come in and beat the you-know-what out of them, right? That's my favorite thing to do every season because I'm a huge Cubs fan. I'm disappointed that that's not going to happen. I'm sure there's a lot of kids out there who are disappointed that they're not going to go through graduation. My daughter included. She's graduating from college, or should be graduating from college in July. Her graduation's been canceled. I'm sure she's really disappointed that that's not going to happen now. Others graduating high school, etc. Very, very disappointing. What they're not feeling is grief, okay? Take, for instance, and this was the example that one of the widows used. Take, for example, the child who's not going to have a birthday party because of this whole COVID situation. That birthday party, while important to the child, it's disappointing that they're not going to have it. But true grief is telling that child or explaining to that child that daddy or mommy is never, ever going to be there for another birthday again. That's grief. Okay? There's a huge difference between disappointment and grief. And by claiming, and this was a Harvard Business Review written article that a lot of us took to task, was about this confusion. I believe the title was, "What You're Feeling is Grief," right? No, what you're feeling is disappointment. There's a difference, okay? Disappointment is, the dang NCAA tournament didn't take place this year. Damn, that's really disappointing. Grief is knowing that my wife was not there for my daughter's 18th birthday. Knowing that my wife will never be there for my children's weddings, for their first child being born, right? Disappointment would be not being able to go to a wedding because it's been postponed or it's actually taken place without people there. I've been invited to a bat mitzvah via Zoom, okay? It's actually still taking place, but I won't be there in person in May, okay? That's disappointing. But I'm not grieving the fact that I'm not able to go there in person. I'm still actually getting to take part. So this is the key difference between disappointment and grief, right? Disappointment is something that we will get over in time. Grief is not one of those things, okay? And that's why I wanted to use this Devine quote from It's Okay That You're Not Okay. There truly is no life to get back to in grief, right? Eventually, perhaps, new things will begin to grow around the crater that is erupted in the center of your life. The whole itself will remain. I don't mean that as a downer either. I mean that a central loss, a loss that shifts the axis of the universe, is not something that simply shrinks over time. Getting back to life can't always happen inside of grief. Instead, we can come to ourselves, to each other, with kindness and respect for what cannot be resumed. We, you, me, all of us, will not return to the life that was. That's simply not possible. What we can do is bow to the damaged parts, the holes blown in our lives. We can wonder what parts of ourselves survived the blast. we can come to ourselves and our irrevocably changed worlds with kindness and respect. And that's what grieving is all about. That is what we as people who grieve, and everybody grieves one thing or another, right? We can grieve the loss of our childhood if we've had, if we've been forced into a situation that, involved a childhood trauma. We can grieve for a lost parent. We can grieve for a lost grandparent, a lost pet, okay? But what we're feeling now during this time of quarantine, self-quarantine, and missing out on events, concerts, various different, sporting attraction, going to attractions, going to the beach, even going to national parks or long walks and hikes on trails that may now be closed. That's disappointment. That's not grief. Well, it's disappointing, yeah, that we can't do these things that we like to do or that we want to do. We cannot compare, right? There is disappointment and there is grief, and they are incomparable in terms of their sort of long-term effect on the human psyche and on the human being. And yeah, you're right, Anthony. Kids don't want to deal with grief. Nobody really wants to deal with grief, to be quite frank. And that's part of the reason why, as widows and widowers, we tend to find that people, friends, people that we thought we could count on as friends, kind of disappear from the scene. They don't want to, or they're not comfortable sitting in the grief with us, right? Knowing that, we're Debbie Downer, right? We're Johnny Raincloud here, because we have touched this grief so profoundly that they don't want to have to deal with that. And it's easier to ignore it or to pretend like it doesn't happen or bury our heads in the sand than it is to really sit with it. And unfortunately, as you well know, Anthony, we don't have a choice but to sit with it as widows and widowers, right? And as grievers, as children who've lost a parent, as children who've lost a grandparent or a pet. These are all real grief, right? And everybody, like I said, everybody has some sort of grief in their life. It's just a question of how that grief impacts and what you internalize and what you sort of, feel in terms of that grief. And it can change, and it does change over time, right? Initially, it starts like the proverbial, storms, just, waves crashing over you time and again and again and again with, just relentlessly storming, the beach that you're trying to get to. And then all of a sudden, over time, those waves start to slow down a little bit, and they're fewer and further between, but they still come. And they're like tsunamis when they do come. They're huge waves, and they can crush you. They can really push you down and crush you as a person, knowing that, Anthony, those words right there that you're using are words that should never be spoken in grief, right? You will never get over grief, okay? Grief is always a part of you in your body, right? Hey, Christine, welcome aboard. Nice to see you. Grief will never leave, okay? You can't get over it. You can move forward carrying it with you. Piece by piece, you can actually start to feel better, but you cannot ever get over it. It will never leave you. What happened when Suzanne died was my heart felt like it shattered into a million little pieces, right? It was so physically painful. I had never felt what I would describe as heartbreak like that in my life, okay? And coming back to the theme of today, yeah, I didn't feel that way when baseball season was canceled, right? Okay, sorry. That was disappointing. Yes, I was disappointed that I was not going to see any baseball this year, or I may not see any baseball this year. I wasn't heartbroken. And that's a real shame, Anthony. Now is almost a really good time to try and make those connections a little bit stronger, particularly given the situation of the pandemic. So, life as we knew it, right, is not going to be the same. So, whether or not we choose to strengthen our relationships or choose to actually sever the relationships that aren't serving us, and that's always an option too, Anthony. You've got to do what is serving you best, in terms of your own grief and your own recovery, right? And I wouldn't even say that you will ever recover from it, because it is so difficult. It's a challenge, and like I said, and that Devine quote that I quoted earlier, the last couple of sentences, are really, really important here in terms of that. And that is, we can wonder what parts of ourselves survived the blast. We can come to ourselves and our irrevocably changed worlds with kindness and respect. Okay? And that is really important, because, yeah, I can understand that, Anthony. I really do feel deeply for you, and I just don't know what, how that can be resolved. It's a difficult situation. Grief is different for every single person. I think you and I have talked about this before, is that, grief is like a fingerprint. Everybody has a different way of dealing with it, even though everybody has grief. I mean, your son has lost his mother, but there's a difference between losing your mother, losing your father, losing your grandfather, losing your grandmother, than there is to losing your partner. It's a different relationship, right? Losing a child is a different relationship. No parent should ever bury a child, is the saying, right? And yet, no spouse should ever have to bury a spouse, right? But here's the reality behind where we are. It happens. We all die, right? I think I said this in my very first talk. We are sentenced to death as soon as we are born. We're walking dead, right? What we do between birth and death is what really counts for us in our lives. And how we handle things like disappointment and grief is part of that. But everybody does it differently, and everybody is wired differently. As I said, we're all energetic beings, and we have these, this energy within ourselves and our bodies that help us to live and breathe and work and function and whatnot. But that energy, right, and that force that gives us life will actually extinguish at some stage and make its way back out into the universe. So, as energetic beings, our energy is here for a limited time within this shell, and then it goes out into the universe, be one with God or the universe or whatever you may want to believe. But the reality is that, there is, while we're here, while we're living, disappointment, grief, happiness, joy. There's all of these emotions and things that we can find and that we can feel. But the reality is, right now, because of the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are scared. We're fearful of what might happen. We're fearful for ourselves. We're fearful for our friends and our families. I know that people are even fearful for their pets, right? Because I believe that the virus can be transmitted to animals. Tigers have, believe it or not, been confirmed cases of COVID-19. So knowing all of that, it comes back to this whole idea of, you know, are we truly grieving during this period, or are we just dealing with a lot of disappointment? So here's another example. I mentioned the baseball season earlier, that I had season tickets and I wanted to go and I was going to enjoy going to baseball, but the reality is that I'm disappointed that I can't. There's a band that I've followed kind of on the periphery since the 90s, since they came out, and I really like them, and I thought they were a really good group. They're called Pearl Jam. They dropped their first album in 10 years earlier this year, right before all this COVID-19 kicked off. I'm supposed to have gone to their concert 2 nights ago here in San Diego. It was canceled. Disappointment. Very disappointed. I understand that it's like a I don't know, an experience to be had if you're a Pearl Jam fan. I have never seen Pearl Jam. I wanted to go. I was really disappointed that I couldn't go. The other thing that I was really disappointed about was the fact that my girlfriend, Christy, was supposed to have come out and gone to that concert with me. She should have been here this whole week, right? Spending the week out in California, because she lives in the Midwest. And I'm really, really disappointed that she wasn't able to come. So was she. We were going to go to the concert together. We were going to spend all this time together. And we're really disappointed. It's really, really, really difficult. Am I grieving that loss? That one is kind of tough. Yeah, maybe I am. I'm grieving the lost time that I'm missing with her. But grieving the loss of going to the Pearl Jam concert? No. I'm disappointed that we didn't get the chance to go. I'm really disappointed that she's not out here and that we're not, spending this time together, because, let's face it, like I said a few minutes ago, we're in between birth and death, and we're in that short span of life that, that we all know can go anytime, right? I've often said time is an illusion, and it really is. So let's try and use it as best as we possibly can. And that means, trying to be with the people that we want to be with, and surround ourselves with the people that we want to be surrounded by, our tribe. And it's interesting because, oftentimes our tribe is not family of origin. And that's what makes us social animals and human. So there is this disappointment right now that I can't be with my tribe. So here I am on these calls every day, doing this lunchtime live broadcast for my tribe, really. I mean, you guys are my tribe. I mean, you're part of that group of people that I relate with and that I want to be friends with, and that, therefore, you're here, you're part of my, my tribe. So from my perspective, there's been a lot of disappointment since the beginning of March, when we went into this splendid isolation piece. But let's be frank, it's disappointment. It's not truly grief. For some people, it is true grief. There are a lot of people out there who are losing loved ones to COVID. There are, a lot of people who are missing out on being able to say goodbye to their loved ones. People dying, in isolation, in ICUs, all over the world, who aren't with their loved ones, and their loved ones are shut out and don't get the chance to say goodbye. Now that is what sparks true grief in the human psyche. So, from my perspective, that is the true grief. And as a society, we will grieve. We will grieve all of the thousands and thousands of people who have died during this pandemic. Because we don't just get over that. We just don't, it doesn't happen that way. It doesn't work that way. We as a society are losing out. It is exactly what Megan Devine was talking about in this quote. There truly is no life to get back to. I have a question that I really wanted to ask everybody. I'm just going to grab it here real quick because I thought it was super important to ask. And that is, how much do you really want your old life back, right? Was your old life serving you in every way? And the reality is that, we don't actually really look at things that way, and we can't look at things that way. The earth is in much better shape than it was because of the lack of pollution, the lack of consumption of extra resources. I saw this morning that spending on retail has gone down nearly 10%. That's the greatest drop in history of consumer spending in the United States, at least. So, we're not consuming on a mass scale like we normally do. We're staying home. We're not polluting the environment. There's a lot of change that's happening, but disappointment and grief are still there for people. Disappointment more so for people who aren't in a situation that warrants grieving. But like I said, the disappointment is, there's a difference here, and I loved the example that this other widow had provided, and that was, disappointment is the child who has the birthday, and is disappointed that they can't have a birthday party, right? Grief is telling that same child that mommy or daddy will never be at another birthday party. That is truly grief versus disappointment. So anyway, I'm coming up on what I would describe as my time, my limit that I set for myself on these talks. I really do appreciate everybody being here. I hope that you guys are getting something out of each and every one of these. I'm going to keep doing them. I love having the interaction and the audience, and I love you guys just being part of my tribe and spending this time with me. I honestly wish that we could spend more time together, and hope that once all of this is blown over, I will get to see more of you personally, and as I like to say, in real life, and not just here on a screen. So thank you for joining me this lunchtime. Join me again tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, 12 noon Pacific Standard Time on Thursday, and I look forward to seeing you then. Take care, everybody.